The idea here is not to do learning and then delivery and then learning and then delivery, but to do them both at the same time. I want to talk about balancing the learning work with the delivery work. Product managers, generally speaking, have to do both. We have to not only do the learning work and the discovery work, but we actually have to get products to market. And we have to do it in a way that respects the timeline and the pace of the market, which means that we have to do it in an agile way. Now, the balance of these two activities has often been called dual track agile. And so that's what we're going to talk about now. Now, to start, I want to define the concept of product discovery. Product discovery is the process that we use to discover user problems, market opportunities, and the products that address them. It's design work, it's learning work, it's research, it's experimentation. Now, when this concept first evolved out of the design field, it was displayed as the double diamond process. Maybe you've seen that before, where initially we diverge as a team to discover and define the problem, and then we converge, right? And then we diverge to come up with a series of potential solutions, and then we deliver them together as a team. Now, back then, the discovery process was a one-time activity. We did the diverging and the converging one time, and that was it. Today, in a world of continuous software, one of the things that product managers have to do on a regular basis is deliver products to market. But the other thing they also need to do is discovery work. And balancing those two things together is a constant struggle for teams and for product managers. And doing so at the pace of the market today means we have to combine those two processes in an agile way of working. Oftentimes, that's called dual track agile, and that's what we're going to talk about in this video. Now, to get started, I want to define this idea of product discovery. Product discovery is a process that we use to discover user problems, market opportunities, and the products that address them. This is design work, this is research, this is learning work, this is experimentation work, right? And when I started my career, this discovery process was often displayed as the double diamond process, right? Where we diverge initially and converge to come up with the problem, and then we diverge and converge as a team to come up with the solution. The problem with the double diamond process is that it was always defined as a single activity, a one-time activity. We didn't do it continuously. But today, given that we live in this continuous world where we're building these continuous systems, the discovery process is continuous. We're shipping, we're sensing, and we're responding, right? We're declaring our assumptions, we're putting something out into the world, testing those assumptions, sensing how those behaviors are changing in our customers, and then continuing that process over and over and over again. And there's a variety of different assumptions that we can test during the product discovery process that can then inform the product delivery process. For example, who's the user? Who's the customer? Do we have them right? What are the needs that they have? Do we understand what they need to do? What features are we planning on building for them? Right? Do we understand the problem space? Does our solution work? Right? And we collect that evidence, and then we continue to ask those questions and build that learning loop into our ways of working. The challenge is that there's learning work and there's production and delivery work, and we've got to figure out how to bring those two things together. And so we're going to talk about integrating the learning work into your production backlog. Now, we're going to do that with a dual track process, right? We're going to have a learning track and we're going to have a production track as we move forward. And the thing to remember is that we need to combine these two processes at the same time as teams are working together. Now, in 2007, there was a team at AutoCAD in Canada that came up with the original dual track Agile diagram, where they tried to explain how a cross-functional team of product managers, designers, and software engineers would collaborate to do both learning and building at the same time. The problem was that that diagram was largely misunderstood to be a series of handoffs from the design team to the product management team to the engineering team, rather than a cross-functional collaboration. The proper way to do dual track Agile is to understand that the learning and the production work is done by one team, the same team. It's two types of work, but it's one team moving together through each one of these processes. In some sprints, there's going to be a lot of learning and not a lot of production. In other sprints, it's going to be a lot of production and building and not a lot of learning. And it's going to be a mix over time. But it's the same set of folks working on the same things at the same time that's going to make this dual track process successful, because they're talking to each other, they're learning at the same time, they're sharing that information in real time, and they're making decisions much more efficiently. And everybody pitches in on both types of work. The idea here is not to do learning and then delivery and then learning and then delivery, but to do them both at the same time. And so as we go to combine that process, those two processes together in our backlog, there are 3 patterns that we could use to combine both discovery and delivery in our Agile backlogs. Actually, in fact, there's 4 patterns. You'll see on the screen that there's 3 options here, but the 4th pattern is one that actually happens a lot in organizations where they don't do discovery work at all. So there's no problem about integrating it with your delivery work because it's just not even being done. But if you're doing discovery work and you're doing delivery work, there's a couple of different ways to manage it. So the first option is to have 2 separate backlogs. I've got a discovery backlog over here, a delivery backlog over here. And the mindset here is that the discovery work, the design, the research, the experimentation work doesn't have to interact with the development work. Now, in a lot of situations, that can be seen as a positive, right? There's a clear separation of the types of work, but ultimately, what we're doing is we're breaking apart the cross-functional collaboration, right? We're saying the designers and the product managers work over here, the engineers work over here, and ultimately there's a handoff between the two rather than that cross-functional collaboration. In addition to that, the product manager now has to manage multiple backlogs. And if a team has to manage multiple backlogs, which is a prioritized list of work, that means that every day we come into work, there are multiple number 1 priorities. Which one do we work on first, right? And which one do we ignore? Inevitably, some of those number 1 priorities are being ignored. And so ultimately, we want to stay away from the separate backlog option. In fact, I'll tell you from my experience, when we used a separate backlog for the design work and for the discovery work, essentially it just became a place for us to put all the work that we wish we could do, and we just ended up doing everything that was on the development and the engineering backlog. So what's a better way? Well, one way to improve on this is to have one backlog where discovery work and delivery work exist in the same place, right? So discovery work becomes a first-class citizen of the backlog. Now, it still stands alone as a different type of activity in the backlog, right? So we've got a delivery story, a discovery story, a delivery story, a discovery story. And there is a lot that can be gained simply by combining this. All the work is in one place. All the work is prioritized against each other. All that work is then assigned to specific people on the team, and the dependencies between the different stories are clear, right? If we don't do this discovery work first, we can't do this delivery work, right? And so what we're trying to do is to create a situation where the backlog is the same for discovery stories and delivery stories. But again, really the definition of done is still focused on delivering the delivery stories, the production stories, not doing the discovery work. A third option is when we actually still have one backlog, but the stories are mixed, right? So every item in the backlog is a mix of discovery and delivery. And the definition of done or the definition of success is not just we built the feature, but we actually did the discovery work to validate the feature. The focus in this third example is on delivering value, right? Not as delivering features, but rather did we build a thing that actually helped our customers, right? And this is a very advanced way of working because it means that there's a tight-knit collaboration between your designers and between your developers and between your product managers. And so if it feels a bit advanced, start with the middle pattern, right? The separate backlog patterns isn't going to work ultimately for bringing together a dual track process of delivery and discovery. But building one backlog where we've got different stories, that's a great place to start. And if that starts to work well and starts to drive the kind of collaboration that you're looking for within your teams, then you can move on to the one backlog example where the stories are mixed, where you've got both the discovery work and the delivery work in the same stories, and you can really prioritize those against each other. The bottom line when it comes to dual track agile and dual track backlog patterns is that there isn't a one size fits all answer, right? We want to build this process so that it fosters teamwork across all the specialties and all the disciplines, product, design, and engineering, and encourages that continuous learning, that discovery, and that delivery. And the only way to do that is to make discovery work part of the work. It has to be acknowledged as a real part of the work, a first-class citizen of the backlog, as well as making the units of work as small as possible. And ultimately, what we're trying to avoid, if we're trying to create a successful dual-track process, is avoid creating multiple backlogs and avoid creating multiple teams where they have to hand off from each other. Our goal in all of this is cross-functional collaboration.